And I make no apology for picking a story for our 9 o'clock hour from the Sunday Telegraph. It says, Corbyn plots tax raid on parents' gifts to children. Now, there are some very middle-classy things which will really wind people up in the shires. And one of them is things like that. Parents' gifts to children. So I'd like to investigate it. And I suppose the question for the hour is, what do you consider to be the bigger threat? Brexit or a Corbyn government? Or you could say Brexit or a McDonnell chancellorship, or any number of other senior Labour positions for that matter, because it puts the willies up the Shire's Tories, I promise you that. Jeremy Corbyn is plotting a major tax raid on children, helped onto the housing ladder by their parents and those who inherit even the lowest value homes. It's a classic second story. Had me reading, because you want to help your children. And on the subject of inheritance tax, it's wrong. There's no, that's why other countries are getting rid of it. It's wrong. You've already paid tax on that money. Then the government come along, you die, and it's a tax on death. I don't like it. I mean, your wealth redistribution crew will come along and tell us that we need less wealth inequality. I get that. But I don't want anybody nicking my money and not let my kids have it. I've already paid tax on that money. Why can't I die and just give the money to the people that I love and brought into this world, and so that they can have a decent chance in life? Well, what about all those people that don't have such a decent chance? Well, go and earn it yourself and go and get your own success and stop nicking my money. And where else are we going with Labour policies as it develops? It's fascinating. They've talked about renationalising, very, very popular. People saying, a lot of people in the chat, oh, Corbyn can't get in. Yes, he can. Stuff like this will be popular. Let's talk about it. George Monbiot is with me, a Guardian journalist who edited the report Land for the Many. I think that's what it was called. Hello, George.
Hello.
Hello. Was it Land for the Many? Is that what your report was called?
That's right. It's a report to the Labour Party, so it's not at this stage Labour Party policy. We were asked to write it by Labour, looking at all aspects of land, the use of land, the control of land, which is just fundamental to whether people have a decent home a decent home to live in, whether we have enough public space, whether we look after the natural world. Land's at the heart of all of this, and yet it doesn't really feature on the political agenda. So we wrote this report to the Labour Party with lots of proposals and recommendations, which they may or may not adopt. It's not in any way at this stage.
No, I know, which is why it's a classic story to talk about. I mean, it's real fear-mongering to those who've made a little bit of money and who've no fault of their own happen to live in the southeast, which is expensive enough anyway. They've seen their houses go up. They like to take a bit of money out to help their children onto the property ladder, and now they're going to be taxed. Was that one of your ideas, George?
Look, people are being taxed already. There's plenty of tax in this country. What we want is to make sure those taxes are as fair as possible. And just like you, we don't like inheritance tax very much. We don't think it works very well. It's not very popular. And it doesn't really make sense to be taxing the person giving the money rather than taxing the person receiving the money for whom it is unearned income. Now, there's a fairly basic principle of just taxation, which is that income for which you have worked should be taxed less than income for which you haven't worked. And unearned income should be a significant source of taxation because you haven't earned it, by definition.
Well, okay, but if your house price goes up, through supply and demand, and you've had to live through the pain of living in the southeast and paying the prices to get on the property ladder in the first place, yes, I understand that that's unearned income, but why should the government have it?
Well, house prices have gone up, not because of any efforts of your own. In fact, it's society.
Well, it's not through any effort of the government either.
And no, I know, but it's not the government.
So why should they have the money?
No, listen, it's not the government who's the ultimate recipient. It's not the government who has the money. It's us who get the money through better public service.
Oh, well, you know what I'm talking about. Well, that's all very dreamy stuff, George. That's dream world.
No. This isn't a sort of academic distinction. It's not like someone in the government says, "Ah, got the money. I'm running off to the Channel Islands to hide it in my fort or something." No, this money goes into the NHS. It goes into schools. It goes into transport. It goes into all the things which we value as giving us a good life. And so what we're saying is, let's make sure, A, this money is gathered as fairly and efficiently as possible, rather than these are really antiquated and unfair and regressive ways we have of raising tax in this country. And B, let's make sure it's spent for the benefit of everyone.
All right. Well, let's get the view of Jonathan Davis on what you've been saying, George. Jonathan is an economist and podcaster. Sounds to me like they're trying to nick people's money, Jonathan. What do you say?
So what's new? I mean, what a shocker that Marxists don't believe people having their own property. Marxists believe that the state should own all the property. So we should not at all be in the slightest surprised that this is the first salvo in their intention to raise taxes beyond the pale, because they believe, as I say, that you shouldn't own anything, that the state should own everything. However, to expand upon it, listening to the guy there,
Nick, this is George Monbiot.
Yeah. Talking about land is everything. My God, I mean, they talk about the Brexiteers living in the past. I mean, this is living 200, 300 years ago. Have they never heard of robotics, automation, AI, the internet? Land is by no means everything anymore.
No, but it has gone up, Jonathan, in value. OK, let's talk about the South East. Let's address that.
And I wanted to pick you up on that. It's simply not true that we all worked hard for our property values in the southeast and indeed the rest of the country, and we've been taxed on it. Absolute nonsense, Andrew. Because if you bought a house in the 60s, the 70s, even in the 80s, and clearly boomers up to the old hat did do that, all they actually paid for was about 10, maybe 15% of the current value of those properties. Everything else grew tax-free. And it wasn't because of supply and demand, as you said. It was because of government policies, as you rejected. It was because of interest rates being too low for too long. It was Help to Buy.
If nobody wants to buy your house, it's not worth anything. That's where supply and demand comes in.
No. Help to Buy was nothing to do with
No.
supply and demand.
What about my point? Prices have gone up because there has been if there's a little supply and a great demand, prices go.
No, that's not true.
Of course,
it's simply
true.
not true. The same argument is said. The same argument is said. If you get too little land and you get a big population, then you're going to boost house prices. Well, how is it possible then that house prices have risen in Australia and Canada?
Demand.
They've not got too little land.
Demand.
The point is, it's because of government policy.
Jonathan, hold. I've got to get George in. We've only got another couple of minutes. Hold on a second, Jonathan. George.
Well, actually, while Jonathan was doing a lot of nonsense about Marxism and stuff, I'm not a Marxist. These are policies which are currently in Germany, France, Ireland, lots of just ordinary middle countries. It's a very sensible thing, what we're proposing. He's actually right about the fact that it's not primarily demand-driven. You would think it is, wouldn't you?
Well, it's supply and demand-driven.
Yeah, no, exactly. But actually it turns out...
There are other factors, low interest rates.
There are, and the other factors turn out to be more important. We did quite a big analysis on this.
Yep.
And so it turns out that actually the number of dwellings by comparison to the number of people is higher in this country than it's been for many decades. There's more supply and few by comparison to the number of households than there's been for a very long time. But what's happened is that small numbers of people now own large numbers of houses, and there's loads of second homes, third homes, fourth homes, loads of buy-to-let properties, and all this has really changed what would otherwise be a simple relationship between supply and demand.
Are you recommending, George, a tax on the increase of a principal private residence?
Well, we stopped short at, so we're not recommending capital gains tax on main residences.
Do you think Labour will adopt that policy? And what about a mansion tax on properties worth over, let's say, £1 million?
We haven't proposed that either.
What about Labour?
Well, I mean, what Labour does is up to Labour. You know, we're not the Labour Party. We're a group of independent people who have done a report to the Labour Party, and what they choose to adopt from the report or adopt that isn't in the report, well, that's entirely a Labour matter.
All right, George, I must leave you. I'm going to leave the last word to Jonathan Davis. Thank you very much indeed for that. Jonathan, how worried should homeowners be? Okay, go ahead.
We should all be worried, with homeowners or not, because if you're a tenant, this of itself is not going to reduce house prices, making it easier to buy. And if you're a homeowner, you're just going to pay more taxes. Everyone's going to pay more taxes under these Marxists. It's not nonsense that they're Marxists. Just look at Corbyn's senior advisors. They're all Marxists. It's as simple as that. Marxism believes that you do not own any property. The state does. And if we let these people in and they stay around for 10 or 15 years, I can assure you we will not be far from the Soviet Union after 10 or 15 years.
Jonathan Davis, economist and podcaster, reacting to a story on the front page of the Telegraph.